1967, the American highway gobbled up over 53,000 lives in traffic fatalities. It injured almost 2 million more victims and cost them close to $3.5 billion in lost wages and medical expenses. This is not taking into account the personal tragedies whose cost in minds and bodies goes beyond calculation. And every day of our lives, this butchery continues. One of the most frequent guilty parties is the driver under 25, the young man who overestimates his skill and underestimates his danger. It takes a lot of courage for some not to give in to this temptation.
Oh, Joe, there was another car accident on Parker's Highway today. A whole car full of teenagers. I get so worried about David since he started to drive.
Now, Fran, you and I both know that Dave is very careful.
Yes, but still, Joe, it seems like every time there's an accident, it's always a teenager. And David is only 17.
Would you like for me to talk to him?
Well, I don't want him to feel that we don't trust him, but I do want him to know we're concerned. And even if he is careful, how about all the other young people driving?
Well, I think you're right. He only started driving in the last couple of months. It might be a good idea just to see how he feels about it.
I'll sure feel easier if you will, Joe.
Well, he should be up in his room. I'll go up and have a talk with him. Hi, Dave.
Hi, Dad.
Mind if I sit down?
Sure, make yourself at home. I just got finished with my trig.
Say, Dave, I just wanted to see how you were making out with your driving. How's it feeling to you?
Oh, it's feeling pretty good. I guess with a little more experience, it ought to be just like second nature to me.
Well, I know I'm well pleased with the way you handle yourself behind a wheel.
Well, thanks, Dad.
There's one thing, though, Dave. I know that a lot of the boys at school don't have the same respect you have for law. It's something your mother and I are concerned about.
Why? Do you mean bad associations might spoil useful habits?
Well, something like that. For example, what do some of the boys really feel like when they start driving?
Oh, you mean like how much they can get out of a car?
That's it. Don't you think there is sometimes a tendency to disregard traffic regulations?
Well, sure, but, well, you find that with everybody, just about.
Well, true, but that certainly doesn't mean we have to be that way, does it?
No, I guess it doesn't.
Well, Dave, when you first got your license and started driving a car, do you remember we had a talk?
Yes.
And if you still remember, we said that you had accepted an obligation and
a responsibility.
That's right. And once you accept an obligation or a responsibility, you've got to follow through on it.
Even when you don't want to?
Even when you may not want to.
Well, I think I know what you mean. Sometimes it's so easy to want to find out just how much speed you can drag out of a family car.
Well, to tell the truth, I kind of feel that way myself sometimes. But I always remember I have an obligation to observe the traffic laws, and I have a responsibility to my passengers and to everyone else on the road.
So you just kind of put the brakes on your mind.
Exactly. Now, I'm not saying it's always easy, but I sometimes ask myself, now, what am I trying to prove?
Oh, you mean make yourself a race driver of the public highway?
Well, sometimes it seems people think that way. As soon as they're in a car, they think they're racing drivers.
In cars that were meant for driving around town.
I would say it's a form of pride.
Pride?
That's right. You start thinking, well, I've got all this car underneath me. Maybe I'm a little better than anybody else.
And so you try to prove it by going a little faster and, well, taking a few more chances.
That's my point. It may seem all right if nothing happens, but
one day, bam, you get smashed.
Yes, and without trying to make a play on words, Dave, it's just like the Bible proverb says. Pride is before a crash, and a haughty spirit before stumbling.
But, Dad, that's talking about people's attitudes, isn't it?
Yes, but it's the kind of attitude of maybe thinking you're better than anybody else that can get you into trouble with a car.
All right, well, that's reasonable.
But let's go back to that first thing you said about bad association spoiling useful habits. Now, what do you think you should do if it just happens that you're in a car with a boy driving recklessly?
Well,
Do you really think you ought to stay in the car with him?
No, but, well, Dad, it'd be so embarrassing just to tell him to pull over so I could get out of his car.
Well, it's better to be embarrassed and get out of the car. If he has an accident with you in the car, you might not be able to get out at all, and that's a lot more embarrassing.
I see what you mean.
Anyway, your mother and I were interested in how you were getting along, so I thought I'd find out.
Well, thanks, Dad.
And Dave.
Yes?
Be careful not to let anybody think you go along with their recklessness.
Okay, Dad. I'll try my best.
Well, I'd better be moving on. I've got some reading I want to catch up on. I'll see you later, David.
What a physics session. Once old Swanson got turned loose from all the details, Avogadro's law was easy. Of course, I don't know what I'd ever do testing out volumes of gas at the same temperature and pressure, but it'd sure make me sound like I know something.
And it'll give you something to keep you busy tonight.
Yeah, it'll probably do that too.
Anyway, I think I'll...
Hey guys, I got wheels. You want to roll with me?
What is this, Harry? Did your folks go out of their minds and give you the car?
Ah, come on, cut it out, Lloyd. All I was doing was offering to drive you home. That's no big deal.
Well, if you want to play chauffeur, my feet won't mind playing passenger.
Hey, great. How about you, Dave? It's a big car. We can squeeze one more in.
Well, how many do you have going, Harry?
Well, just you two so far. In fact, that ought to be enough.
Well, I don't know, Harry. Every time you pull out of the parking lot...
It looks like a rerun of Sebring.
Oh, well, maybe once I burned a little rubber, but I didn't get caught. And besides, I'll be careful, Dave. You know me.
That's probably why he doesn't trust you.
Oh, it isn't that I don't trust you, Harry. It's only that, well, I don't see any sense in driving as if the family car were a Formula One racer.
Well, now look, man, I only wanted to do you a favor. My folks just got a brand new car, and I only wanted to drive you home and let you see what it's like. So come on.
Yeah, come on, Dave. It's not that far to drive.
The car's over here in the student parking lot.
Boy, she's a beautiful car, all right.
How'd you ever talk your dad into letting you drive this to school?
Well, as usual, he's out of town somewhere, and my mom has her own car. So I guess you could say I kind of inherited this one.
Well, it doesn't make any difference to me, just so long as I get home.
Come on, hop in. Boy, listen to that engine purr. That's 450 horses.
You don't need to give us the factory specs. Just take us home.
Sure is a good-looking car, all right. There's no getting around that.
You know, Dave, you've got class. Whatever anybody says, you've got class. Now let me show you something. Boy, did you see the way this baby handles?
I've seen the way you handle it. Now, come on, Harry. You said you were going to be careful.
I am, man. My reflexes are quick besides. Hey, watch the way I take this stop sign.
Wait a minute. Harry!
Yeah, you're fast, Harry. I'd like to see your rapid stops against a brick wall.
I'm not sure I want to see that, but I know one thing for sure. I'm not staying in this car to find out what it looks like to hit a brick wall.
What's the matter with you, Dave? Are you chicken or something?
I just don't think you know enough about driving to think you can drive better than anybody else.
Well, I know enough not to get caught.
Well, that's the whole point. Why do something you'd have to get caught for?
I should have known better than to bring you along.
Well, you did say you were going to be careful, and the school that certified my idea of carefulness would have flunked you on tricycle behavior.
I've been driving longer than either one of you guys.
Harry, you couldn't possibly have more than 2 months on either Lloyd or me. Now, just pull over to the curb. I can walk home from here.
Hey, what's the matter, Dave? I can get you home.
Harry, I really am afraid that if I stay with you, I might go home by way of the hospital. Now let me out.
Now that's just what you get when you try to do something nice for somebody. They just spit in your face.
Thanks, Harry. I'm sorry you feel the way you do, but...
Yeah, I know.
I don't think you know too much. I'm getting out with Dave. I'll see you around, Harry.
You know, you guys are the ones that are missing out. I'll see you around.
I wonder what's eating Harry.
Well, I guess he's got his problems.
All right, but ever since he started driving, you'd think he was king of the open road. I don't know how he ever slipped by in driver's ed.
Oh, he's smart. He does well on any course when he tries.
Probably drove like a little old lady when the teacher was around. That may be one reason he's so sold on himself. And that's one of his problems, too.
Well, you know, my dad quoted a Bible proverb about that to me last night.
Yeah?
Yes, he said, pride goes before a crash.
You're not telling me the Bible's talking about cars.
Of course not. It's just the idea of thinking you're better than somebody else. Well, that can get you into all kinds of problems.
Especially with cars. Anyway, Dave, you mind if I stop by your place on the way home? I'd like to go over that physics with you again.
Sure, I guess so.
The way I figured it out is that any two gases under the exact same pressure and exact same temperature will occupy the exact same volume.
Well, that seems just about it as far as I can see. And according to what it says here...
I know. We'll get all wrapped up in half a dozen other laws, all of them running around in circles qualifying each other.
Well, we've got to understand it by tomorrow. I just know we're going to have a test on it.
Okay. Let's try the first problem in the book.
All right, let's see. An automobile tire at gauge
I'll
pressure...
get that, Dave.
Okay, Mom. Now, let's see. Where were we, Lloyd?
An automobile tire
Hello?
at gauge pressure.
What? He did? Where? Parker's Highway? Why, no, Mrs. Higgins. He's right here with David going over some physics. Yeah, certainly I'll tell them. And I am sorry to hear that. Thank you for calling, Mrs. Higgins. Goodbye now.
What was that, Mom?
Harry Overworth turned over in his car on Parker's Highway a half hour ago.
Oh, no.
Was he hurt?
Well, they don't know. They've just got him to the hospital. Someone had seen you two get into the car with him at school. And then they saw the car turned over, and they called your mother, Lloyd. That was just her on the phone now.
Did you tell her I was okay?
I certainly did. It sure gave me a start to hear the news, though.
Well, you know, Mom, it might not be a bad idea if we all went over to the hospital to see Harry.
Well, maybe later on when your father gets home. But it worries me that you might have been riding with a boy like that.
Well, we started to, Mrs. Summers, but Dave made Harry stop and let us off. You know how Dave is. Monkey business is for the monkeys.
Well, I'm glad for his being that way, too, Lloyd.
You know something else, Mrs. Summers? Dave is the first man I ever heard apply the Bible to driving a car.
How's that?
Well, we were talked about people's attitudes on the way home, and he said there was a proverb that went, "Pride goes before a crash."
Well, that didn't mean cars.
Oh, I know that. It's probably valid for a whole stack of different things. But with the way Harry was singing about being the world's greatest driver, it sure got him into a crash.
Well, sometimes it takes just one little bit of wisdom to keep somebody out of a lot of trouble.
Well, I'd better hurry home. Knowing my mother, she was probably rattled to pieces when she heard the news.
I'll be seeing you, Lloyd.
Mrs. Summers, if you do decide to go see Harry in the hospital, do you think you'd mind terribly if I came along? He could probably use some cheering up.
I think it'll be all right. David will call you when we go.
The Bible obviously is not a driving manual. Nevertheless, as in this case, its good sense provided a safeguard. Its right principles relative to self-control, regard for others, and just all-around sensibleness could well mean the difference between life and death to the young driver.
The program, All Scripture is Beneficial, is produced by the Watchtower Society and presented by Jehovah's Witnesses.